Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kim Ricketts, and I'm here to introduce and welcome Jeffrey Ma, who is visiting us as part of the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. He's here today to discuss his book, The House Advantage, Playing the Odds to Win Big in Business. Jeff and the now infamous MIT Blackjack team use math, statistics, and teamwork to beat Las Vegas casinos legally. He believes that correct mathematical knowledge and outlook can help businesses manage the unpredictability that comes with any venture. He graduated from MIT in 1994 with a degree in mechanical engineering, and following MIT, he co-founded 3 companies, including ProTrade and Citizen Sports. So please join me in welcoming him to Microsoft to discuss the House Advantage.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's funny that you said the infamous, famous thing, because I don't know if you ever. This is going to be a total non sequitur. How many of you guys have ever seen the movie The Three Amigos? There's a scene in The Three Amigos where they're reading about this villain they're about to go face, and his name is El Guapo, and they said, we're going to have to go find the infamous El Guapo. And they're like, what does infamous mean? And they start thinking about it, and they're going, infamous. It just must mean more than famous. He must be really famous. So they got really excited to meet this really infamous or famous villain. Anyways, that was totally non sequitur. So how many of you guys have seen 21? Okay, so you'll know that the greatest bit of Hollywood magic, or what I like to call Hollywood magic, is how you turn an average-looking Asian American male into a dashing British white guy. Because that was me. I was the inspiration for the main character of the movie 21 and the book Bringing Down the House. And Jim Sturgis, who is British and is white, it's actually pretty funny. Well, first of all, I want to introduce my sister, who's sitting in the front row, who is works here and has been here for 8.5 years. This is the first time she's ever heard me speak, so hopefully, well, she's heard me speak a lot since I was like 2, but yeah, and I still haven't stopped. There we go. So I can't remember where it was now. You made me lose my train of thought. Oh, the white guy. Yeah, we're always back to the white guy. So Jim Sturgis played me in the movie, and when I was walking into the premiere of the movie, and people always ask, and I'm sure we'll get these questions in a little bit, how much of the movie was true, how much of it was fake, the whole thing. What I always like to say is, it was Hollywood. There was a lot of it that was Hollywoodized. And I was going into the premiere with my dad in Las Vegas, and I pulled him aside. I said, Dad, I've got some bad news for you. And he said, what? And I said, well, one, in the movie you're dead, and I'm white. So that's one of those, do you want the bad news or the really, really bad news? So I like to tell some stories that weren't in the book, and actually weren't in either book. And so I'll tell this first story, actually, we'll just go over this quickly, but it's kind of a funny sports story. So any of you guys are sports fans in here? Sports fans? So in Blackjack, and back in those days, we had the opportunity to play Blackjack with a lot of celebrities. Okay, and there was one weekend, actually, that we got to play Blackjack with the New York Knicks. And I think you were actually there. It was in Foxwoods Casino. It was during the NBA lockout. And so any of you guys that follow basketball, you probably know that the NBA is headed for another lockout potentially soon because they pay guys way too much money and they don't make a lot of money and on and on. Anyways, so we go to Foxwoods during the NBA lockout, and what do you think NBA players do when they can't play basketball? Well, they go to casinos. And I sat down and had the pleasure of playing Blackjack with John Starks, who's the guy in the upper left-hand corner there. And I sat down next to John, and first of all, John, he's supposed to be this guy, this burly guy from the streets, orders a bottle of Merlot. And I'm from California, the Bay Area, and certainly wine is something I appreciate, but I wouldn't think this NBA player would be drinking Merlot. But I've since learned that you never actually know what an NBA player is going to drink. You can't judge a book by its cover. I had the pleasure of playing craps about 3 years ago with a guy by the name of Jalen Rose. Jalen's played for about 56 teams in the NBA, and he's now retired. And Jalen and I were playing craps, and we have some common friends because he was trying to get into sports media at that point, and I was already involved with sports media. And he said, hey, Jeff, let's grab a drink together. And I said, okay, Jalen, what do you want to drink? And he says, whatever you want to drink. And I said, gosh, I don't know. Being a data-driven guy, My one data point is that John Starks drinks Merlot. I'm not going to order a bottle of Merlot with Jalen Rose, who's like 6'9" and anything. So I turn to the waitress, and I have visions of rap videos going through my head. And I turn to the waitress, and I say, "Excuse me, ma'am, could you give us 2 glasses of Cavassier?" I didn't even know what Cavassier is. So the waitress starts to walk away, and as she walks away, Jalen Rose grabs her and goes, "Excuse me, ma'am, could you make mine an apple martini?" So, anyways, back to John Starks and his Merlot. John goes through this transformation that I'm sure many of you guys have seen your friends go through. I'm sure you've never done this, where you start as this intelligent human being walking into a casino, sitting down at a table, and then 5 hours later become a drunk, degenerate gambler. And poor John lost all of his money and pulls out his last $500 chip and puts it on the betting circle. Okay? Now, the dealer gives him an 11, and the dealer has a 5 up. So anyone that plays blackjack here, what do? Double down, which means you need to put another $500 chip down. Unfortunately, John did not have another $500 chip. So I flip him a $500 chip from my stack, and he puts it down, and the dealer gives him a 5 to make 16. I told John, first of all, flip the $500 chip to him. I said, pay you back when you win. The dealer gives him a 5 to make 16. John looks at me and goes, "Man, you just jinxed me." I said, of course, I'm counting cards, so I know there's still a really good chance the dealer is going to bust. So I said, "John, don't worry. Hold on. I think the dealer's still going to bust." The dealer flips a 10 to make 15, and then gets a 10 to make 25. John hands me back my $500 chip, doesn't say a word of thank you, and it was at that moment that I decided I would never have John Starks on my fantasy basketball team. I really showed him. So, all kidding aside, there's a lot of valuable business lessons that I learned from my days playing blackjack, and that's why I wrote my new book, The House Advantage, which you guys have seen in the back. But the most important lesson, and probably my defining moment, most people have their defining moments. It's like the birth of a child or getting married. Me, it's at a blackjack table. I was at Caesar's Palace, and I was 22 years old. I'd been playing blackjack for about 6 months. And again, so we'll go into this a little bit later, but we are totally 100% objective. We use math to make all of our decisions. There's no subjectivity. And the math calls for me to bet 2 hands at $10,000. So I do. And I get 11 on the first one and a pair of 9s on the second. Okay, and the dealer has a 6 up. So the 11, as we've covered with Mr. Starks, is a double down. So I put another $10,000 down. I get a 7 on that to make 18. The pair of 9s, I actually need to split. So I need to put another $10,000 down. That means I can play each 9 separately. I get a 2 on the first 9 to make 11. And again, for those of you guys paying attention, I double down. So I put another $10,000 down. The dealer gives me a 10 on that to make 19. Sorry, he gives me an 8 on that to make 19. And then a 10 on the last 9 to make 19. Dealer has a 6 up. Dealer flips a 5 to make 11. He gets a 10 to make 21. And I lose $50,000. And this woman behind me shrieks, "Oh my God, that's my entire mortgage." And I want to turn around and go, "Where the hell do you live?" Because I know here you're not getting a lot for $50,000. But, again, math and not emotion, and using math to make decisions. So the math calls for me now to bet 3 hands of $10,000, and I do. And I get a 9 on the first one, I get a pair of 9s on the second, and I get a soft 15 on the third, and the dealer has a 5 up. So the 9 is, again, a double down. And so all these decisions that we're making are based on something called basic strategy, which if you're ever going to become a gambler or want to gamble and play blackjack in a casino, you need to learn basic strategy perfectly. Because the average blackjack player, the casino has about a 3% advantage over them just because of the way they play. If you learn basic strategy perfectly, you can get that advantage the casino has over you about 0.5%. Okay, so just by learning the right thing to do at all times and following it. So the 9 I have to double, and I get a 10 to make 19. Stand on the other 19. The last ace-4 I double also, because it's a 5 against a 5, and I get a 4 to make 19. So I have 3 19s. Dealer has a 5 up. I'm about to lose either $100,000 or win back that woman's house. And it was one of those moments, this is one of those moments that I wondered, how in the world did I get here? So for me, I graduated from MIT in 1994 with a mechanical engineering major, which I've done 0 with, like never once used anything of it. And I did this sort of rebellion where instead of going into the world of medicine, I instead went into the world of finance. I was a pretty crazy kid. And then I went to work on the SIBO, and then the whole internet thing happened, which was great. I mean, internet's been great. That's what it looks like. It's a big cloud. They don't actually depict the internet as a cloud anymore. Remember back in the day when that was always what it looked like? No? No one's with me? And I always feel like, so I went on to start 3 different companies. All 3 we've sold for different levels of success. The last one we actually sold 3 months ago to Yahoo. And during this whole time, I was a professional blackjack player, a professional card counter. So I always like to throw up and pay homage to the inventor of the internet because it's great that he did this for us. And now we can say he invented 2 things, one good, one bad. He invented the internet. Probably none of us would be here if it wasn't for that. And then he invented global warming, which wasn't so good. So the statement that people always say when I tell them I'm a professional blackjack player is they say, 1, isn't that illegal? And actually, it's 100% legal. It's been tried up to the highest level of the Supreme Court. It's just using your brain to beat a game. It's like, what's your name? Wenda. So you and I play Monopoly all the time, okay? And you buy the crappy utilities, and I buy Boardwalk and Park Place, and I always win. One day you get mad, you throw up the board in the air, and you say this should be illegal. It's just using your brain to beat a game. What should be illegal about that? The second thing people say is, are you banned from Vegas? Okay. There's no one that waits for me at the jetway at McCarran Airport, and the minute I get there says, Mr. Moss, sorry, you've got to turn around and go home. Now, how many of you guys have seen 21? If you guys have seen 21, know that I'm in the movie, right? This is when you pretend you remember me in the movie, because otherwise it's a very sad moment for me. I'm a dealer in the movie. I'm in the movie at about 56 minutes and 25 seconds. About. Okay, and no, really, I am in the movie. Small speaking role, got a SAG card. Nominated for Academy Award, Best Actor in a movie that's about themselves that's in the movie for less than 5 minutes. But when I was out there filming the movie, I remember I sat down with the cast, and this little scene that I did, which I literally have 3 speaking lines. The guy that plays me says, Jeffrey, my brother from another mother. We have this witty back and forth. Obviously not very memorable to anyone. That scene took me 3 days to film. So I was out there for 3 days. And one of the nights, the cast said, hey, Jeff, let's go. I'll go dinner together. So we're heading over to dinner, and Kate Bosworth, who's plays my love interest in the movie, pulls me aside. And for all you males out here who've ever seen Kate Bosworth, if she pulls you aside, you say, yes, Kate, what would you like? So Kate pulls me aside, and she says, Jeff, I've got a great idea. And I said, what's that, Kate? She said, after dinner, I think it'd be really fun if we all go play blackjack. And I was like, I don't know, Kate. I don't know what a good idea that is. We're at the Palms. They know me really well. She says, it's okay. You're with me. I'm a big star. They won't bother you. And I said, Kate, it's been a long time since Blue Crush. I don't know what a big star you are anymore. But what seemed like a horrible idea, about 5 bottles of wine later, seemed like this great idea. And so we go upstairs to the Palms Casino, the Playboy Casino there, and I sit down and I start to play blackjack, or try to play blackjack, and the floor person looks at me and he goes, Jeff, what are you doing? And I said, I'm here with Kate Bosworth from Blue Crush, no big deal, right? And he says, listen, let me check. And he calls upstairs, comes back to the table and says, not only are you not allowed to play blackjack, but if your little friend Kate's at the table, you're not allowed to be within 20 feet of the table. Which was cool because Kate all of a sudden thought I was really cool, and that gave me a lot of street cred. Because the next day she was telling everyone on the set how cool it was. But yeah, just not allowed to play blackjack, not banned from Vegas, sometimes not allowed to be within 20 feet of the table. And then the last thing people always say is, remind me never to play poker with you. Okay, now, the interesting thing is this really highlights the difference between blackjack and poker, and why blackjack is such a great game to base this whole concept of data-driven decisions on. You can do everything right mathematically in poker and play against someone, and all of a sudden that guy does something completely irrational, and you lose. Right? And the same is true when you try to use numbers to predict the market. You can do everything right, and then someone thinks it's a really good idea to lend, $1 million to some farmer who makes $12,000 a year to buy a house, and they think that no one would do that in our country, would they? No, probably not. But anyway, so the point is that blackjack is completely rational, right? The dealer has to do the same thing all the time. So why blackjack? Well, blackjack is the only game in the casino that's subject to something called conditional probability, meaning what you see impacts what you're going to see. Okay, you contrast that to a game like roulette. And one of my favorite stories from after the blackjack days were over, okay? is went out to Vegas with one of my buddies, my buddy Brian. And as we head out to Vegas, he says, Friday night, let's go. It's just you and me. Coach me to play blackjack. And I said, okay. So we go and we sit down at the blackjack table. And to his credit, he actually does everything I tell him to do, which is funny because now I'll go with my friends to a bachelor party to Vegas, and we'll be sitting there, and they'll be like, hey, why don't you come with us and just tell us what to do, help us in blackjack. And I'm like, okay. So I sit back there like one of the old guys from the Muppets with a beer, watching them, critiquing them play blackjack. And they'll look at me and they'll say, hey, what should I do on this hand? And I'll say, oh, that's a hit. You should hit it. Nah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to stand it. I'm like, why am I here then? But it's funny because this actually highlights this great thing that I'll talk about later, which is that let's say they have 13 and I tell them to hit it. Well, if they get an 8, I'm a genius. But if they get a 9, I'm an idiot. And why should they ever make a movie or book about me? And people tend to judge so much of whether you're right or wrong by the results versus the actual decision itself. And again, we'll talk about that later, but I just thought I should highlight. So back to our roulette story. So here I am with my friend Brian, and Friday night, after a couple hours, we won about $2,000. So I turn to Brian, I say, hey, we won, let's go out, it's Friday night, let's go spend some of this money at the club. Like a reputable club, not the club you guys are all thinking about. So we go to cash the money out, and as we're going to the cage, Brian all of a sudden disappears. I'm like, where'd Brian go? And before I can see anything or hear anything, all of a sudden I hear, $1,000 on black. I look over, and Brian's at the roulette wheel. I walk up to Brian, and I grab him by the shoulder, and I said, what do you do? Before I can do anything, the roulette wheel's spinning, and I hear 14 red. Brian lost half of what we just won. I pull him aside, start to go, and before I can do anything again, I hear $1,000 on black. Okay, now I'm getting a little concerned. So I look at Brian, and I go, what are you doing, man? This is roulette. This is a loser's game. And he says to me, don't you see what's happening here? I said, what do you mean? And he points up to this magical sign above the roulette wheel, which shows the results of the last 20 spins. And the results of those last 20 spins, the last 7, have all been red. So in Brian's mind, black is for sure coming up. And I go, Brian, you know, there's nothing going on here. This is just roulette. Every spin is independent. It doesn't matter. It has no history. He goes, listen, I know you know math, and I know you know blackjack, but I know gambling, and roulette's gambling. So buzz off. Fool and his money are soon parted, blah, blah. Well, I walk away, and 3 more improbable reds in a row. Brian's down $2,000 now. And I got to explain to him the folly in his ways. But the point is that people don't understand that often, right? They try to learn from history when history doesn't mean anything. They do that in craps, right? They think that the dice have some history that means something. But blackjack is different. If I take all 4 aces out of a deck of cards and hand that deck of cards to you, what do you think the chance of you dealing yourself blackjack are? 0, right? You got no more aces. There's no way you're going to deal yourself blackjack. And that's all that card counting is. And anyone understand that this should be probably the smartest crowd I've ever spoken to. So I expect someone to get this answer. Explain the fish and the elephant. Fish have no memory. Elephants have a memory. Memory like an elephant. Forget it. All right, now that makes a little bit more sense. All right, so back to counting cards. Okay, so there was a professor by the name of Ed Thorpe, and he was at UCLA at the time. And he and his wife wanted to go on a vacation to Las Vegas. But of course, since he was this smart mathematical guy, he knew that the casino's edge was so big in so many games that he'd be a loser, basically, if he went and gambled. But on his way to Vegas, a friend of his handed him this study that had been done, which was done by these Army technicians, and they'd use calculators to calculate this optimal strategy for blackjack, which we now call basic strategy. Okay, and he takes this strategy, looks at it, and he says, gosh, I want to do this. So he goes to Vegas, okay, and imagine that this guy, Ed Thorpe, wrote this book called Beat the Dealer, which revolutionized blackjack. Then he wrote this book called Beat the Market and was the first quantitative hedge fund guy. And he's made hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, and he tells this story about his first time at the blackjack table. And he says to me, Jeff, I said, Ed, yes. And he says, well, I went to that table. I had my card, which told me what to do in every situation. I was going to play completely by the numbers. And I'm like, great. I started with $10. I said, okay. So you know how much I ended up with? I'm like, God, I don't know, like $100,000, $200,000, $1.50. I lost $8.50. but everyone else lost all their money. And so that moment of only losing a little bit made him realize that blackjack might be beatable. And what he did is he took sort of his new technology, okay, and this is in the 1960s, his new technology was an IBM 704 computer, and he did simulations on how the odds of blackjack change when there's a deck with no twos, or if there's a deck with no threes, or no fours, or no fives. And so basically what he did is he simulated what it would be like when all the twos were gone, when all the threes were gone. And what he found is that when there's a lot of high cards left in the deck, tens, face cards, and aces, it's in the player's favor. When there's a lot of low cards left in the deck, 2, 3, 4, 5s, and 6, it's in the dealer's favor, and 7s, 8s, and 9s are roughly neutral. And so what he was able to determine was that when there were a lot of high cards left, the odds were in the player's favor, so that he should bet more. When there's a lot of low cards left, it's in the dealer's favor, so he should bet less or not play at all. So this is the most basic sort of lesson from blackjack, and really the most basic business lesson that I have. It's really just this idea that data changed blackjack, right? It changed it from 1930 when blackjack was introduced to 1960 when people discovered card counting. People just lost at blackjack because they didn't pay attention to the data. They just lost. And in a lot of ways, that's what's happening these days, that people are just still losing unless they utilize data in so many different industries, in entertainment and media, medicine, sports. Unless you utilize data, there's so much out there, and there's so much better technology to start analyzing that data, you're missing out. Now, there are some other things. We're going to skip this one. I'm going to try. So the reason that we focus on all this type of stuff, right, the numbers, and so many times I deal with people, because I've done quite a bit of work in sports, with sports teams, and ultimately, I actually work with the Portland Trailblazers, who's obviously Paul Allen's team in basketball, helping them decide who to pick in the NBA draft. Anyways, but ultimately, using numbers helps you win, and we believe that winning is sort of the key and the reason you use numbers. It also helps you make difficult decisions, okay? Now, if any of you guys didn't believe I was in the movie, there I am. I'm a dealer. And so the reason that that's up there, besides to prove to you guys that I was in the movie, is to remind me of one of the most difficult decisions that I've ever had to make, okay? And one of the most unconventional decisions that I've ever had to make. So I walked into, let's see, where was I? MGM Grand. And I had just learned something called advanced strategy, or numbers plays, which basically you use the count, you use the information that you've gathered about what cards are left to actually vary your basic strategy. So you do some things that people would think are not with the book. And so I walk up to the table, and the math calls for me to bet 2 hands of $8,000, so I do. And on the first hand, I get a blackjack. So I win $12,000 on that hand. On the second hand, I get a pair of tens, and the dealer has a 6-up. So believe it or not, there are times when you want to split tens. And if those of you guys who are mathematically inclined, let me explain to you why. Imagine that every card that you don't see is a 10. Is it a higher expected value for you to split those tens or not? Of course, it's a higher to split the tens. Okay, so, but splitting tens is very unconventional. It's something that people don't really like. When you split tens and you have $25 on the table, it's a production. When you split it when you have $8,000 on the table, it's a production. So I go and the dealer looks at me and she starts to wave off my 20, and I said, no, I think I want to split those. She said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I do. So I put another $8,000 down. I get an ace on the first one to make a 21, which is great. And then I get a 9 on the second one. And the dealer has a 6-up. Now, mind you, this is a $500 table, so everyone at the table wants to kill me right now. Because they believe I've just screwed up some cosmic karma in some alternate universe where I took someone else's ace in this other universe, and now all of a sudden the dealer is going to make her hand. Because people believe, there's a lot of smart people in this room who are like, he did ruin, no wonder I lost that one hand. I knew it was him. But no, people believe this stuff. And that's kind of the funny thing about gambling, if you think about it, because really smart, intelligent, rational people lose their heads. And that's why it's such a funny thing. In the House Advantage, I talk about it, why it's such a funny thing to think about in terms of business. Because there's times in business where people just lose their head because of emotion also. So here I am. I've done this, and the dealer flips a 10 to make 16, and then gets a 10 to make 26, and I win. I win another $16,000. I pick up my chips, and I run away from the table because I don't want to face the wrath of the other people at the table. But I started thinking about why this decision was such a difficult decision for me. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons why, and a lot of them are really good, interesting kind of business lessons. The first one has to do with something called omission bias. So in blackjack, so many of the times, and I talked about giving advice to people on what to play, so many of the mistakes that people make in blackjack are ones of inactivity. So imagine that I have a 15. There are people that would just say whenever they have 15, they're not going to hit it, no matter what the dealer has, because they don't want to bust. They don't want to be the one that takes the card and ends the game. They'd rather at least let the dealer play it out, because then they still have a chance to win. But that mistake is a horrible mistake from an odds and math perspective. And that's something called omission bias, where we as individuals, and we do this in our lives, think about decisions you make all the time. You favor maintaining status quo over taking chances or making a decision. And we do it in our personal lives too. I always allude to that couple or that friend that is in this relationship that's horrible. And every day they wake up and they just want to go with the relationship because maintaining status quo is easier than breaking up with someone. But they have to realize that decision to maintain status quo is a decision to maintain status quo. So just standing on that 20 was like the easier thing to do, but ultimately it wasn't the right thing to do. The same thing is, there's another bias called loss aversion. So we are more impacted by a loss than we are by a gain of the same amount. And so I'm adverse to losing because I think, gosh, I got 20, I don't want to lose that, right? I don't want to lose the opportunity to win that money. But ultimately, as an organization, right, you should always be thinking about how do I make the most money, not how do I protect what I have already. All right, I hope this one should hit kind of close to home here, right? Which is, when I was, just to put it in perspective, this week I've been to Facebook, I've been to Google, and now I'm here. Okay, and I'm at Facebook telling the story. And I was there, it was actually last week that I was at Facebook, and I was there the day that they announced that they got to 500 million active users. That's a lot of people. And as I'm there talking to a crowd, and I'm the only person that's ever spoken at Facebook twice. I've tied to that company very well. And I'm saying this thing, and I'm saying, so now that you guys are at 5, because the first time I ever spoke there, they had 40 million users. So in that time, they've grown over tenfold. And I said, now that you guys are at 500 million users, are you guys going to take the same chances that you took before, or are you going to, and this guy from the back row who's on their executive team, his name's Chamath, he screams, hell yeah! Because he knows that it's important that they're not averse to be, they're not loss averse, that they still continue to take the same chances going forward that they did all the way growing to where they are right now. And that's an important thing because that's a hard thing to overcome. And then the final point actually is something that I'd love to illustrate by use of a good friend near and dear to my heart. He's not really a good friend, but near and dear to my heart. Bill Belichick. Okay, Bill Belichick is the coach of the New England Patriots. Super successful, won a ton of Super Bowls, won a ton of games, but not very popular because he makes very unpopular decisions and very unconventional decisions. And he made this decision that was so unconventional this year, all right, against the Indianapolis Colts. He went for it on 4th and 2 at his own 29-yard line when his team was up by 6 points, and it didn't work. But it was unconventional, and the mathematicians would tell you that it was a good decision. Now, I'm not here to tell you it was a good decision or a bad decision. I'm here to tell you how people reacted to that decision. And I sat there with a guy by the name of Bill Simmons, who's a very famous writer for ESPN, and the two of us were arguing about poor Bill Belichick's decision. We kind of went back and forth, and Bill, finally frustrated, threw up his hands and looked at me and says, you know what, we know it was the wrong decision. I said, Bill, how do we know that? And he said, because it didn't work. And I said, really, is that how it works? So I have 19, and the dealer has a 7-up because Bill's a big blackjack player. And I decide that I want to hit that 19, and I get a 2. Was that a good decision? It had a good outcome. You laugh. There's a hedge fund manager that I know that mistyped a ticker symbol when he made a trade and didn't realize it until 3 days later. But that stock went up 60% in that time frame. And he claims that was a good decision. So separating the decision from the outcome is so important. and how you look at things. So why do we make difficult decisions? We'll go over this quickly. We don't want to end up like this guy. We want to end up like this guy. That's Sean Payton. And now, just to give you guys an understanding of the power of using numbers to make you understand how to take risks. Okay, now Sean Payton, coach of the NFL, coach of the New Orleans Saints, who won the Super Bowl this year, made two very unconventional decisions in the Super Bowl. The second of which was a successful decision where he decided to go for an onside kick at the beginning of the second half. An onside kick is this very risky maneuver because most of the time when you do it, people expect that you're going to do it. And you only recover the ball 25% of the time. So it's basically like this 1 in 4 chance that you're taking. It's very risky. Okay? But what no one talked about is how there's a difference between surprise onside kicks and expected onside kicks. And surprise onside kicks are actually recovered 60% of the time. So 6 out of 10 times. And it was a calculated risk by Sean Payton, and it helped them ultimately win. But he knew that if he had made this decision 1,000 times, he would have recovered at 600. Although it wouldn't have been a real surprise if he'd done it 1,000 times at that point. But the point is that he knew that this was going to be, that this was a calculated risk. So one of the interesting things, and again, kind of tying back to the whole idea of business and how we fit this into business, is you think about this guy, Sean Payton, and you think about this guy, Bill Belichick, and they are two of the most unconventional coaches or managers, or what do they call coaches in the NFL. Why are they able to make these difficult decisions? Anyone know? What? Data. They got data, but everyone has the data. That they are able to make these decisions for one reason. I was talking to a guy by the name of Daryl Morey, who was the general manager of the Houston Rockets, and I was yelling and screaming about how stupid it is that most NFL coaches knowingly make wrong decisions. And he said to me, he goes, it's not really wrong decisions for their set of preferences. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, ultimately, their first goal is not necessarily to win the game. I'm like, how can that be true? He goes, their first goal is not to get fired. And so Bill Belichick and Sean Payton have the most job security of any team any coaches in the NFL. So they can just make the right decision because them not getting fired and them winning are aligned. They have aligned incentives with the team, with the players, with the owners. There's a really great economist by the name of John Maynard Keynes. I'm sure many of you guys have heard of him. He wrote this book. Why did he get shushed in here? That's a lot of passion for Keynes. But he has this great line that says that history would teach you that it's better to fail conventionally than it is to succeed unconventionally. I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. The actual quote is in my book. But the point is that these guys are just trying to protect sort of their jobs and self-preservation and on and on and on. And so much of like what you do in your jobs and in your lives and in your companies should be set up in a way that you have people with common goal setting, like aligned goals, right? That's a big key. The first guy's the rapper, Common. It's a goal. It's like a rebus. Work with me here? No? Okay. Anyways, but the point is that common goal setting or aligned incentives is so important to success in an organization. Otherwise, you have people who are worried more about self-preservation, and you see it all the time in sales goals, right? When you people who are bonused quarterly in sales, and again, I talk about this in my book, the idea of bonusing people quarterly is tough because sometimes they're focused on making their bonus, and they might not be focused on building the best or locking in the best customers from a long-term perspective. So it's definitely a difficult challenge. We're going to skip over fat guy right now. So let's go back to these 4 keys to making better decisions. First one, as I talked about, realize decisions are everywhere. A decision to maintain status quo is still a decision. And I think that that's an important thing to think about as you kind of think about how you innovate and how you decide what changes to make. The second thing is evaluate decisions from a true zero frame of reference. Don't think about, okay, I've made $10,000 right now. I want to protect that $10,000. No, you're not thinking about that, right? You're thinking, how do I continue to grow and make the most money that I can for my organization? Clicker? There we go. Imagine you were able to make the decision millions of times. So what's your name?
Anish.
Anish. Okay, so you and I are going to play a game, okay? Ready? I'm going to flip a coin. If it's heads, okay, you're going to pay me $1 million, okay? If it's tails, I'm going to pay you $5 million. Okay. Do you want to play that game?
No, I don't have $1 million to give.
Okay. I didn't even have to, normally I have to bring in my big goons. I normally have to say, I've got 5 goons behind me, and we're going to settle up as soon as I flip that coin. So okay, now what if I say to you, listen, you have an unlimited credit line with me, okay? You can settle up anytime you want, and you can play this game for as long as you want. Now do you want to play that game?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So to really make good quantitative decisions, you have to be able to, 1, think about making the decision millions of times, and 2, creating an opportunity for yourself to make that decision millions of times. In blackjack, one of the reasons that so many blackjack players fail, who are good card counters, is they go to Vegas with $1,000 and they bet $100 on a hand. Before they know it, variances, they get on the wrong, 1 standard deviation of variance, and they all of a sudden lose all their bankroll, and they never have a chance to make that decision millions of times. And then my goons come and get you, and they're shaking that money out until you get that money, right? So you think about that too in terms of finance and everything you do. You don't want to put too much of a bet in one area, so that if you're making the right decision, which you hope you are, that you get to make that decision. Like if we played that same game and we just said, hey, we're going to flip a coin and I'm going to give you $1 or you give me $1, you'll still want to play that game, but you want to play it millions of times. And the final thing is our Bill Simmons thing. This idea of don't confuse the outcome with the decision. A bad outcome does not equal a bad decision. And the reason that I feel like this is such an important thing is that when you go back and you evaluate what you've done in your life and the decisions you've made in your life, if you just evaluate them based on the outcome, there's no chance that you're ever going to be able to repeat the success you've seen so far. You have to evaluate them based on the decision, the fitness of the decision. So let's go back to this big lesson. Okay, just to recap, down 50,000, woman behind me shrieking about her little shack in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And here I am, I've got $50,000 out on the table. Dealer has a 5 up. Dealer flips a 10 to make 15. This math thing works. He gets a 6 to make 21. Maybe this math thing doesn't work. And I lose another $50,000. I lose $100,000 in 2-3 minutes. So I wander upstairs to my room at the Caesar's Palace, and I collapse on the floor, and I stare up at the ceiling, and I go, why is there a mirror up there? But once I get over that, I was 22. I don't know why there's a mirror up there. I'm like, do people get ready like this? How does this work? So once I get over that, I start thinking about my decision and what I had done. Not necessarily the outcome. I think about the decision. 1, am I falling for omission bias? Am I falling for inactivity? Do I want to quit playing because that's the easy thing to do? Am I being loss averse? Am I being impacted by this loss so much that I don't want to lose any more money? Right? If I was able to make this decision millions of times, what would my decision be right now? Did I make the right decision and just suffer a bad outcome? And then finally, was it was it the right decision, the right outcome? And I thought about it and I said, God, I did make the right decision and it was the right thing, and I got to go back down and play and give myself the opportunity to make this decision millions of times again. And I did, and I went down, ended up winning back my $100,000, and I won an additional $70,000. So I was net up $70,000 for the weekend. And in so many ways, I had wanted to quit. But I believe that was sort of in the first chapter of my book is called The Religion of Statistics, because I really believe that that's what made me this believer in the religion of statistics, because I had this test of faith that I all of a sudden overcame, and here I did, and I won, and I came back and I won and ended up having a movie and a book made about me, and now I get to talk to people like yourselves. So I think we have some time for questions. People have questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you play the market, and if so, where does the past performance does not guarantee future?
Yeah, I think there's some things with the market that are interesting. One, I think the market is, tough just because it's so different than blackjack for me. It's not perfect. I actually worked as a trader on the Chicago Board of Options Exchange while I was starting to do blackjack, and I felt like what we did on the exchange was gambling, and what we did in the casino wasn't. No, I'm serious. I'm completely serious. And so for me, I think there's little things that you can look at on the market. I think that having a long-term perspective is one of the best things to think about in the market, because I think people always overreact to earnings announcements, right? Is this company that all of a sudden was 1 cent under earnings, does that suddenly make it a bad company because it just missed the estimates and it totally gets overblown? Right? There's, another idea is just like risk arb or something like that. If you're looking at a merger, the Blackjack principle of looking at a merger would say that if you play the risk arb game, you just have to make sure that if one of them goes in your face, that you don't lose everything. But over the long haul, you'll probably be doing pretty well. So there are little things to do in the market. Yeah.
As you move from card playing into more realistic, more reality things like the stock market or sports teams, it strikes me that you're moving from tame problems to wicked problems. I don't know if you know that vocabulary, and if so, could you comment?
No, can you explain that? I don't know the tame and wicked.
Tame is sort of things like chess or Go, where it may be very complicated,
right.
But it's
right. Got it.
Real world is.
Well, I think that the key with wicked problems, is that what you call them?
Wicked.
The key with those is that you don't want to strive to have perfection in using numbers to solve those problems. You want to try to solve them in a better way than they've been solved before. I was one time talking to Billy Beane, who's the subject of the Moneyball, the general manager of the Oakland A's, and he was talking about how it'd be great to start using analytics in soccer. And if you compare baseball, right, baseball is sort of a tame problem compared to soccer, which is a lot. Would you say that analogy works with your terminology? Yeah. So he says this to me about soccer, and I said, God, Billy, it just seems like it'd be so hard to do something in soccer, to do something great in soccer. And he goes, you know what? You don't have to do something great. You just have to do something good. You just have to be better than what's being done right there. So, I guess like my answer to you would be, hey, let's not focus on solving the world's problems. Let's just focus on getting people to start to actually look at data before deciding which customers to spend more time on and which to spend less time on. Yeah.
You mentioned how the difficulty with trying to analyze poker as opposed to blackjack is the element of human error, that the guy that you're playing against won't act how you expect him to. How do you account for human error in analyzing the success of sports teams?
What kind of human error are you talking about? The difference, okay, just so we're clear, the difference in poker and blackjack and sports teams in the market is just that there's so many more variables to try to analyze, right? You can analyze what will happen if people make bad mistakes or play badly, but that's just a whole other component and a whole other thing that you've got to try to analyze. So it's almost like there's too many unknowns, there's too few variables and too many unknowns in those cases. So I think in evaluating sports teams, again, that question you asked is a very good question, which is that blackjack is so perfect, right? The dealer is never all of a sudden just going to say, hey, I'm going to hit 17 because that's what I feel like doing today. So you don't have to model that potential. But what the key is that when we think about these more wicked problems or this whole thing, we think about how do we get better at them. We don't think about how to make them perfectly. So I have a good friend that's a professional poker player. His name's Andy Block. I'm sure some of you guys have heard him. Played on the MIT Blackjack team for a while. And he and I talked about this, and I said, so Andy, when do you use intuition? Like when do you use your gut to make these decisions? And he was like, I don't use gut in the traditional way, but if I face a situation that I haven't had a chance to sit down and model, I'm going to look at whatever evidence I have in my brain at that point, and it's not a pure data-driven decision anymore because it's not been modeled in a spreadsheet. So I guess there's just times where you face situations there where you just have to do the best you can. Back there.
Can you talk a little bit how team play changed the basic strategy and the math, and maybe specifically, what about the chemistry of people trying to create alignment around the right math?
That's a good question. Well, one, people always ask me, do you miss playing blackjack? I'm assuming I can drink this water. Yeah, perfect. I was just doing a television interview the other day, and they had water in front of us, and as I was leaving, okay, so I was the first person in these 6 interviews, and we're sitting at this desk, and there's water in front of us, and I didn't drink the water, thank God, because as I'm leaving, the woman's walking me out, and the other one says, remind people they're not supposed to drink that water, it's just there as a prop, and I'm like, good, I'm glad I knew that. It's okay. All right, so anyways, the team dynamic of, first of all, people ask me what I miss most about blackjack. And it's not playing blackjack. I've played millions of hands of blackjack in my life, and there's a reason the World Series of Poker is on ESPN, and the World Series of Blackjack made it 2 seasons on the Game Show Network. Okay, not that interesting, but I do miss the the teamwork, the camaraderie, the idea of here you are with 4 or 5 of your buddies going to Vegas to take down the man, and then you go and you beat the man, you come back, and I mean, any of you guys that have been to Vegas, you know it's one of the funniest things, right? The flight to Vegas, everyone's so happy. Everyone's talking to the waitresses, they're like dealing, they're playing they're like, everyone's so happy. The flight home, people are depressed, they're hungover, don't want to talk to anyone. And we were the few people that didn't have that, right? We went there, we were serious, and when we went home, we were partying because we were happy. So that aspect of it, that teamwork aspect of it, I'll always miss. And in terms of the idea of team play, what team play did most for us was it made us more efficient. So it didn't really change the overall strategy. We still had people, we would go to a table. So I'd go into with about 4 or 5 teammates, and there'd be 3 spotters or backcounters that would sit down at a table, and they would count the table, and once the table got good, they would signal to us. We'd walk over, and they would pass off a code word to us, and there's all these ways you can do it. So in the movie, this is dead on. Even words they use the word paycheck, right? Paycheck means 15 because people get paid on the 15th of the month. I might turn to if the spotter, I'm walking and the spotter might turn to the dealer and go, man, you just took my whole paycheck. And I would know, walking up hearing that the count was 15. So I would rub my nose, the universal sign for I know. I got it. I'd sit down. And it's funny because people go, you guys weren't so obvious in the casinos like they were in that movie. And I'm like, yes, we were. But you walk around the next time you're in a casino and see how many people are doing things like folding their arms or rubbing their nose. It all happens all the time, So that was really the team aspect. The other aspect of team play that's just so big is you realize how important trust is in any organization, right? So many levels of trust. The first level of trust is trusting people that you hand them $100,000 in cash and they're not just going to go run off with it. Trust that the people that are standing at the table counting those cards for you are doing their job properly so that you can do your job properly. And I think about that a lot because I'm an entrepreneur. And it's the same kind of dynamic that happens when you go from a company of like 2 people, you and your partner, to a company of 15. If you don't trust the people below you to do your job effectively, and I'm sure plenty of you guys have micromanagers here who don't trust you to do your jobs effectively, and you're like, listen, if you just backed off a little bit, we'd be a much more efficient organization. Questions? Other questions? Yeah.
When you look at the recent global financial crisis, which is being described as the first mathematician-led meltdown, systematic meltdown. So, do you?
That's a crock of crap. I mean, it's like pretty simple what happened. And first of all, just so you guys know, we have a once-in-a-lifetime global economic meltdown every 10 years. I mean, look at history, right? Every 10 years, this one was big. It was bigger than what we've seen. But it's the same kind of thing. People get irrational. The market gets overbought. It's very simple. People were trying to find ways to make more money. And maybe those were mathematicians, but the mathematicians weren't the ones that were they weren't the ones ultimately that were deciding to do that. They were the ones being told to do that. Right? And yes, they created CDOs. They created all these crazy things that no one really understood. But is it their fault that like John Mack doesn't know what's going on in his own company and can't describe to someone what a CDO is? And no, it's not the mathematician's fault, right? It was like a whole industry and it was a whole culture that just went crazy. Now that we all read books, like Michael Lewis is a good friend of mine. Now we've read Michael's book, and if any of you guys haven't read it, right after you're done reading my book, you should read The Big Short. But you probably will read it so on Amazon, it says like, people are buying these 2 books together, and it's mine and Michael's book. And I sent Michael a screenshot of it, and I said, Michael, it looks like people are buying our books together, probably in slightly different quantities, but they're buying them together. When you think about those books that have been written, you read them, don't you guys just kick yourselves and go, how the hell did we not all see this coming, and why aren't we all rich right now? Right? But it's just, there's some dynamic that we're all just kind of wrapped up in this world of, okay, real estate just keeps going up and up and up. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book, actually, which is, I think, personally, that I wrote, because I wrote it, I think it's interesting. It's just this idea that in life, and even no matter how mathematical you are and how much you focus, because if you focus on history, right, the history would say, yeah, real estate always goes up. There's no problem. These mortgages are going to be fine because real estate's always going to go up. But what I tend to think about is that sometimes focusing too much on the numbers and not thinking like, so you can think like a mathematician or you can think like a scientist. And a scientist would try to figure out why these numbers keep going up, or why these mortgages are, or really look for the root cause of all this. And I have a chapter that says think like a scientist, because I think you need to challenge these things. And maybe mathematicians helped, but if we had real scientists in there, we probably might not have gotten quite to where we were. Yeah, other things? Yep.
I have a few blackjack questions.
Sure. If they're really, really specific blackjack, maybe you should ask me afterwards.
No,
Because we don't want to lose everyone.
in terms of card counting.
Sure, go ahead.
So one, in terms of how deep did they cut the decks nowadays to prevent card counting from being
Right.
useful, does that invalidate it? Second one is when people go in and play and try this stuff and they're a nobody and they try to do card counting, how much of varying their bet, if they go from $5 to $1,000, does this set up the red
If you
flag?
go from 5 to 1,000, you're probably going to get kicked out of a casino pretty
And
quickly.
then if you win, you put $10,000, you got $10,000, $100,000 in front of you that you won, and then they want to kick you out of there. Are you going to get to leave with your money?
Yeah, they can't take your money.
And
I
then,
mean, that whole thing in the movie, like the movie starts out pretty good, like normal, solid, and then it goes a little sideways at the end. It's entertaining though. The end is my favorite part, but the actual realisticness of it, no, isn't right. Sorry, what was the last one?
once you've been kicked out once, are you kicked out from everywhere? Do they all talk?
No. I mean, they all talk, but like once you get kicked out from one place, you're probably going to have trouble playing at other places, but you're not necessarily already kicked out of those places.
Just for a while before we get on your level.
Yeah. You can do it for a while. Honestly, if you guys want to try card counting now, what you want to do is just keep it on a smaller scale and stay at bigger places and not have this. And you guys all have good jobs, so you don't need to worry about it. But you don't need to think about this as making a living. You think about it as going to Vegas, getting some good comps, and actually winning money or even coming out even versus like losing like everyone else does, and not be so focused on making tons of money. Because you can go into like the Win these days, and you can bet hundreds of dollars on a hand, and they'll never notice. You could probably be a card counter there for years before they would care. Yeah.
Before 21 released, there was a documentary on the History Channel.
Yeah.
Was that a better depiction of what actually happened, or how close was that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it was a documentary, so it was more accurate. I mean, when I watched 21 the first time, I was like, oh my God, this isn't what happened. And then I was like, oh wait, it's not the Jeff Ma documentary, because there's probably about 6 people that would want to watch that. It's actually a Hollywood movie. And so that's really, yes, it's called Breaking Vegas, I think, on the History Channel. It's pretty accurate. Yeah. Yeah.
So you've done a lot of work in sports and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to, pick a sport today to bet on, what would be the decision framework? I mean, if you want to say what would be the sport, that's cool too. But I'm more interested in the framework.
Well,
like baseball versus soccer. Baseball is just for
so in anything that you do when you're trying to get an advantage, is you're trying to figure out where the inefficiencies lie. And the inefficiency in sports is really based on something called the availability heuristic. Okay, it's a really fancy way of saying people tend to remember things. People tend to put a higher probability on things that they can remember or they can envision versus things they can't. It's like, let's say today, there's a couple ways that you guys can all go home, right? Because you guys got this horrible traffic around here, right? So there's probably one way that you like to go most of the time. Imagine that, because it's always the fastest way. And then imagine that, yesterday there was a big accident that way, right? And so you're like, God, that way is so slow sometimes. I'm going to go this other way. And even though that's the wrong decision, you're placing a higher probability on there being an accident again because that's what you can remember. So in sports betting, a lot of times, and in the market or whatever, people overreact to short-term things, to things they can remember. In pro football, one of the best ways to, it's very simple, right? And it's not going to work all the time. But most of the times, teams that get blown out one week, the next week are good value because people remember them getting blown out. Teams that crush teams one week are good value the next week because people remember. Another thing is that you just look, there's an article that just came out in ESPN the magazine about my book and about some of the stuff we talk about in the book. And one of the things we talk about is fumbles. Look for things that people think that have a high skew like when we're talking about it, it has a high skew towards the results and doesn't really have that much to do with the underlying decision. So in pro football, we all know that turnovers are huge, right? Turnovers cause teams to win or lose. But actually predicting turnovers is really hard, and actually controlling turnovers is really hard. So teams that lose because of a lot of turnovers are often going to be good value also. I don't know if that answers your question. But, yep.
So Jeff, what do you think about the stock market? Do you think it's more like blackjack or the poker?
I think it's more like poker, much more so. But I think there are ways that you can try to make the market more like blackjack, right? By focusing on, like a guy like Jim Simons from Renaissance Technologies is the top hedge fund trader of the last 10 years, and he would probably say the market's completely like blackjack. Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned the importance of data-driven decisions. And a lot of times what we have these days is a mixture of both qualitative and quantitative data. So how do you actually bring in a lot of the qualitative and put that in the math that you use for the quantitative?
You have to create ways to put qualitative decisions quantitatively. Does that make sense? So let me give you an example, okay? And this is going to get a little deep for you guys, but there's the book The Blind Side. Have any of you guys read that? So there's a whole thing in The Blind Side about how offensive linemen, left offensive tackles, became one of the highest paid positions in the NFL. Yet there's no statistics in the world that will tell you whether an offensive lineman is a good player or not. So that's a purely qualitative thing that people say. But there was one NFL executive that was not happy with that idea of this being purely qualitative. So what he went to do is he wanted to put quantitative boundaries on it. And he talked to about 15 different coaches. And he said, on any given play, what can an offensive tackle do? And they said, well, it depends if it's a run or a pass. So we started with the run or a pass. He says, well, let's see if it's a run. Well, it depends. What's their assignment? And what he ended up doing is he came up with a decision tree of 32 different combinations that an NFL offensive tackle could do on any play, and created this new framework. And then he set quantitative framework, and then he had high school coaches that got paid in tickets to basically sit and watch game film over and over again and create a new statistic, a new quantitative statistic based almost on qualitative judgments about what an offensive left tackle can do. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Maybe one more.
Okay, one more. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, go ahead in the back, sure.
So, just it's a question about the movie. Does the back room really exist, like where they did the beating and everything?
It does. It does exist. It's funny though, because they're all like corporate now. So like the realistic thing is they can't do anything to you because it's not illegal. But they definitely try to intimidate you. There's a book called Card Counting for the Casino Executives. So in other words, how to catch card counters. And like number one thing they do is like violate their physical space and try to intimidate them to see how they react. So, cool. All right, well, thanks, guys.